So again, I erased the one that I made with my pen here, but the production function here, notice these lines here. These are your marginal levels of output. So from each additional input that we hire, the marginal output fell, and this was our law of diminishing marginal return. So notice here we have two quantities. This is what I meant to say before. And I apologize about being a little long-winded in the last video, but it's really important that you understand this kind of basic stuff before you get going here. This is the output here, the quantity of apples, and this is the input, the picker. So it's two quantities on this production function here. But we're going to look at a chart now and calculate these marginal values of output, and hopefully it's not too tricky for you. So you have a chart on your slideshow, looks like this guy. Now the question at the top is, the reason we're doing this is because we're going to try to figure out how much a worker is worth, and we're going to also figure out how we can increase a worker's worth, or the value of a worker. Now some of you might be like, man, Mr. Sutton, what is this? You're just going to put a dollar value on a worker? Like, you can't just put a dollar value on a man or a woman. Like, that's not kosher. But we will. We can figure out an economic value of a worker. As perhaps morally pungent as that might be, we can do it, and we will. And we do this all so that we can figure out how many of them to hire, or how many machines to purchase. And here's what we're going to do. So this is the exact, this is the production function here. So this information between these two, this helps you build your production function. And I'll make it smaller so that it doesn't bleed here. But now, what we're going to do is we're going to figure out this marginal physical product. And again, on the chart that I just showed you here, these little lines represent our marginal physical product. So they're the additional output that comes from a unit of input. So our input is the worker here. Well, how much did that first worker contribute to the number of airplanes made? Hopefully, you're sitting there, you go, that's pretty simple. We went from 0 to 5, so that's 5. And let me make that a little bit bigger now. Okay. Made 5. That's pretty good. All right. Now, the second worker made how many? How many did they contribute? It's not 9. It's not 9. They didn't contribute 9. The first worker did 5. The second worker did 4. And the third worker, it's not 12. How many additional airplanes did the third worker, how many was he or she responsible for? Well, before they made 9, now they make 12, so that's 3. And then if you hopefully get in the hang of it, 2, 1, and then this guy didn't contribute jack. 5 workers made 15, 6 workers made 15. 0 is how much he produced. So if I ask you in terms of airplanes, how much was the third worker worth, what would you say? Hopefully you would say he or she was worth 3 airplanes, because this is essentially the value that these workers have in terms of the product that they produce, right? So the first worker is worth 5 paper airplanes. The second one is worth 4 paper airplanes. But that's not really particularly helpful if you're trying to figure out, we'd rather put it in a dollar term. And if you look over here, I've got total revenue, which is something that hopefully you're like, oh, I know how to do that. That's price times quantity, Mr. Sutton. I'm all over that. Well, okay. Do we know in this box what the quantity of airplanes produced was? Well, yeah, Mr. Sutton, it's right here. It's right here. This is our quantity column right here. This is our Q. This is our quantity. And it's 0. It's 0 in that first box. Okay, all right, I'm with you. Now, what's the price of the airplane? Oh, Mr. Sutton, I don't have a price column. Well, it says airplane price here, and it's blank. It is blank. I have to tell it to you. So notice airplane price, and then it's got the marginal revenue here. We're going to assume that this firm here operates in a perfectly competitive industry, which means that what's going to be true about the price? Well, it's going to be the same regardless of how many units this firm produces or consumes here. So 5 will go for all of these. So I'll just draw a little line down. It's 5 all the way to the bottom. Can you figure out your total revenues? I bet you can. Go do that right now, and I will wait. I'm still waiting. So here they are. Here's your quantities are in this column, and your prices in this column. So you just boom, 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 back and forth, times 5 times 5. And I'm not going to take a lot of time reviewing that. Now, this is actually an additional step, but I think it's important for you to see it here. Because this is the amount of money we can bring in, but it doesn't, again, it still doesn't tell us the dollar value that each worker is worth. That is in this column here, this last column. So this right here, I'm going to write this. Let me pause. So this one, the marginal revenue product, tells us the dollar value of each worker. And you might be thinking, man, Mr. Sun, again, I don't like that. But if I asked you earlier, how much is the third worker worth in terms of airplanes? And you told me 3. Well, if we know that he can make 3 airplanes, and we know the price of an airplane, it shouldn't be that hard for us to figure out that he is worth 15 bucks, right? That's what he brings to the table. He will bring me $15 worth of revenue by his productive activity. How about the second worker? The second worker is worth 4 airplanes. Well, I can sell each one of those airplanes for $5. So that means that he or she brings me $20 worth of value, of revenue. How about the first worker? Well, he brings me 5 airplanes, so 25. All right? Take a second, try to figure out the bottom 3 for me. Hopefully that's making sense for you. If you can't, look at the formula here. So it's the marginal physical product. This is the amount of airplanes that each individual worker produces. Look at those, and then you're going to multiply it by your marginal revenue, which is always 5. Do that for 1, 2, 3, and then get back to me. Hopefully yours looks something like this. Now, the reason I made you do this with the total revenue here is you didn't have to do it, but I think it's kind of illustrative to show you what's happening here. So this is the marginal revenue product. So this is, notice the change in revenue that each worker brings. So if you notice, the first worker brought $25 worth of revenue, where before, when we had 0 workers, we had no revenue. We produced nothing. So they were worth $25. The second worker brought 20 additional dollars, so their marginal revenue product was 20. So the change in total revenue was 20. The third worker, the revenue went from 45 to 60. They brought $15 worth of revenue. So that's how much they were worth, and so on and so forth. So that's just another way for you to think about it. Now, we can't decide yet. We figured out how much a worker is worth, for sure. But we can't decide how much or how many of them to hire yet. And we haven't talked about how a worker's worth can increase here. So let's take a second. Let's deal with this one. How could we make them worth more? How could we make this number bigger? Well, think about how we got it. One of 2 things can happen. And you're going to actually end up writing this a little bit later, I think, too. MPP or MR, or both of them, would have to do what? Increase. So if the price of the airplane got higher and went to like $30, well, then every time you would be multiplying 30 times 5 for 150, 30 times 4 for 120, would change these numbers dramatically. Or if each worker could produce more. How might a worker be able to produce more? What might happen to that worker? Think back to your production possibilities curve. What happened to, what did you need to be able to produce more? I should be here in education. I should be here in developing human capital. I should be here in having more physical capital, more machinery, more tools, those types of things. Sure. And those are all beautiful answers. Now, what about how many of these guys to hire? Well, it seems like we wouldn't want to hire the 6th one, right? Like, he doesn't bring me any money. I don't want to hire him at all. But I really want to hire this first worker, man. He brings me big money, big money, big money, big money. But I don't know about all these guys in the middle. Well, what would have to be true? So this is essentially another way to think of this marginal revenue product. This is the benefit the worker brings, right? But if you're going to make any decision, you can't just know the benefits. You got to know something else, right? You got to compare what you think, not just the benefits. You got to compare the benefits to the cost, right? So what's the cost of a worker? Cost of a worker is their wage. Now, if you knew the cost of a worker, you might be able to make a comparison here. So let's say that the cost of the worker was $15. 15 bucks. How many workers would you hire? Well, let me ask you this. Would you hire the first worker? Sure. Because the wage, here, I'll put the wage, I'm going to put it over in this column here. Let's do this. Squeeze me in a little. Let's put it over here. Okay? So if the wage is 15, but the worker brings in 25, man, that looks like that's $10 worth of profit. I'll do that every day and twice on Sundays, right? And if the wage is 15 here, well, the second worker brings in $20. Well, 15. I'm making $5 in profit there. Good to go. Keep it going here. What's this one? Well, 15. Here's the cost of the work. The benefit's 15. Is there a loss here? No loss. No loss. So you'll hire up until this point here, where your marginal revenue product is equal to your wage. So the rule is, and I'm going to probably do this again later, but hire when wage, actually let me say this, when MRP is greater or equal to your wage. All right, that's your rule for hiring a worker. So now you basically know everything. What I want you to do here is I want you to try it on your own. Ignore this part up here. Suppose the price, ignore this when you do it. Okay, you don't want that. But this is the next graph on your chart here. We'll talk about this one in the next video. But this is for you to practice now. Okay, let's see how you do. And I realize I changed these. These are no good either. Old book used to use these terms, but the AP test uses MPP and MRP. So you should be good there. Okay, give this a shot. See how you do. And then check yourself in the next video.